Okay, in this section we're going to talk about how to make dovetail drawer boxes. So there'll be drawer boxes with a dovetail joint. Dovetail joints are very popular in higher end kitchens, even in custom cabinetry like built-ins. So if you're not familiar with a dovetail joint, when you pull the drawer box away from the lower cabinet and you look on the side of that drawer, you'll see a dovetail joint. And it's not in all kitchens. In our last set of cabinets, we just went with a straight normal dado and groove joint. This one is both a very strong joint structurally, and it's also a very attractive joint if you add it. So we have a jig we're going to be using to make these dovetail joints. It's not very hard to set up. All you need is the jig, which costs around a little over $100, $120, and I'll show you how I set this up. So it's out of frame right now, but we'll do a close-up of me putting the wood in here, and I'll show you me machining them and all that stuff. But you do need a router and a router insert. So when you buy the actual jig, it comes with an insert. If you have, and really it's designed to work with Porter Cable. It's a Porter Cable jig. It's designed to work with Porter Cable routers, but there are adapter kits you can use. I have a Bosch router, and I bought an insert for this, a little adapter to allow me to accept it, and I bought that as a Bosch part. So I'll have a link to that product if you have a Bosch router. But what it does is actually gives you a little collar that kind of sits in here and it rides on the jig. But again, I'll show you that in a little bit. So you'll need that jig, about $120 or so for the jig. I got this one on Amazon.com. For the drawer box material, now the drawer box consists of front and back, two sides, and the bottom. I'm going to be using hardwood maple. It's very commonly used for drawer boxes. I bought this in S2S, 3/4 inch thickness, and I planed it down to 1/2 inch thick. So we're going to be using 1/2 inch thick wood. The previous cabinet we built for the first set, we didn't do dovetails. We just did like a basic groove and dado type setup. For that one we used plywood. Again, we're using hardwood for this one, but the bottom insert, the bottom of that shelf, you could use 1/4 inch maple ply if you could find it, if you want to, but you could also just use birch, and that's what we're going to be doing here. If someone opens the drawer and there's stuff in it, you're not even looking at the bottom of the drawer anyway, you can get away with using birch, and it's cheaper. You can get it anywhere. You can get birch plywood at Home Depot. So this is a dovetail joint. I did some practice runs with 1/2 inch thick plywood, and you can use it on plywood if you wanted to. It's just you're going to see those ply, you're going to see the plies of the plywood show, and it's not a great joint to do with dovetail joinery for plywood, but you can if you wanted to. Certainly for your shop products, if you're making cabinets for your workshop and you just want that strength. Dovetail joints are really nice because, number one, they're very attractive if they're done right, and they're very strong. Even just trying to pull them apart, I haven't glued this together yet, but it's a pain in the ass to get these apart. So the fronts of the drawer, when you're looking at it, won't have anything on it. The sides is where you see it, and it's designed to prevent them being pulled apart, when you open the drawer repeatedly. So you can put this joint on the front joint where the side meets the front, as well as where the side meets the back. And I'm going to put it on all four corners because that's probably the easiest thing to do. So I've already dimensioned my wood in terms of the length I need them to, and I took into account how far these sides kind of recess into the front. My front and back boards will be the full length I need them to, but the sideboards, since we're doing 21 inches long, they need to be 21 inches long once they're assembled. So you need to cut the sideboards a little shorter because you do add some length when you put them together. So we're going to do all four corners. I'll just show you me doing one, see what that looks like, and we'll fit it together. A couple things to note. I had originally intended on making 4-inch wide drawers, so all my hardwood maple was actually cut to 4 inches. And then I read the instruction manuals for the Porter Cable jig, and it says, if you really want an attractive looking joint, stick with widths of your hardwood in intervals of 1 1/4 inch. So 3 1/4 inch, 4 1/4 inch, 5 1/4 inch, that sort of thing. They don't want 4 inches, 3 inches, 3.5 inches, those sort of width dimensions don't look as attractive with the way this dovetail lines up. You'll get like a half joint, and they recommend against that. It would be structurally fine, but it just wouldn't be as attractive. So what I did was I had planned on making 4 inches wide, read the instructions, said crap, I needed them to be 4 1/4, so I cut them all down to 3 1/4, which was the next one down. So these drawers are going to be actually pretty narrow. They're not as wide as I'd like them, but that's a lesson you guys can take when you build yours, is to make sure that when you go to prep your hardwood, it's in that 1 1/4, 2 1/4, 3 1/4, 4 1/4 zone there. So we went over the router. I'm going to now refocus in on this jig, show you how I set it up. Again, I've already done some practice runs with the plywood. You really do need to make some practice runs and make sure the jig is set properly, you know what you're doing. We're going to be walking the router from right to left as opposed to left to right. You'll see that. All right, let's get a zoom in on here. And the first thing the manufacturer recommends you do is lay out your 4 box boards on the table, and then like you were going to make a drawer, then lay them flat so the inside's facing up, and then write an I or write on inside on all the pieces, so you know which side's the inside, and then write A, B, C, and D in all the corners where they meet. And I've done that over here, and I can show you a picture of that, but it's also in the manual. So I'm just kind of going to give you the Cliff's Notes of how to use this for our project here. So let's go ahead and I'll show you what this looks like in a picture, and then we'll zoom in here, and I'll show you how this gets set up, and we'll make our cuts. All right, so I've got my Porter Cable Dovetail Jig set up here, and it pretty much comes out of the box like this. It's got a couple flanges here, which you can directly mount to the top of a workbench, but the manufacturer also says you can just clamp it to the work surface. So that's what I have here, is a temporary setup with a couple C-clamps on either side. So looking at this, you have a jig for, we're doing half-blind dovetail joints. So this is the jig for that one, and this comes as a standard part of this unit. It's got a clamp here, which you swing down, up and down to lock the workpiece in place. There's a workpiece here that'll come in, and there's a top clamp here. In addition to that, there is a gauge, depth gauge over here, and some depth gauges over here. So these cutouts allow you to set your router depth for your dovetail router bit. So that's how this is set up. I just clamped it on. This router has a collar on it, and I have an adapter part to get it to work on my Bosch, but this particular collar came with this kit, and it fits right over here. So what it allows me to do is, there's actually a stop on it, so I can slide this in, and then I could loosen my, so I have a slide here that pretty much lets me move, adjust the depth of this router plunge, so I can go up and down with it by releasing this button and pushing down, but I only want it to go to a certain depth, so they provide a little stop here on the left. So what I'm going to do is put the router in there, and I'm going to lower the router till it makes contact with that stop. Okay, it's locked in place, and now what I can do is I could lock my stop gauge. Right. Okay, so now when I go to engage this, my router is set. Okay, so what I'm going to do next here is get my workpiece set up. And to make this easier on myself, I'm actually using my scrap pieces as a guide, just to make sure I get this right. But what you want to do in general here is take the, I'm going to take the front board, I'm going to slide it into here, and first thing I'm going to do is actually loosen these 2 knobs. Now these 2 knobs control the up and down depth of this jig. I've already set the back and forth depth on a previous run, and when you set yours up, it'll get set up that way as well. So I'm going to just push this here. I'm not going to seat it finally, just kind of just get it under this jig, all right? Put it right there, and then I'm going to push down, and while I hold down, I'm going to tighten these knobs back down. And what the manufacturer says you can do actually is put another scrap piece over here, just so this lays down over it evenly. Alright, so now our jig depth is set for this 1/2 inch workpiece. Alright, so the next thing I'm going to do is grab this next piece, which I believe is here. What I'm going to do is, this will slide up under here, and I'm going to have to loosen these knobs a little more. Alright. And this will slide in there. Alright. Now I can tighten this a little bit. If I want to, I can also put another... Oh, so this was actually already tightened. So I want this to tighten when I push down on this hammer here. Alright, so now that this vertical board is secure, I want to make sure that it's flushed up against the top of this, pushed up against this jig here. Alright, and the next thing they want you to do is, there is a little set screw here with an Allen wrench, and initially you would push it all the way to the left and then push this up into it, but I've already had it set up from a previous run, so I'm good here. So this gets pushed into this jig, and what you have to do next is open this, actually, push that right into the jig, into this. You'll loosen this top clamp, and you push it into this vertical piece. So you have your horizontal piece here, your vertical work piece here, and then you're just going to push down on this and clamp it in place. Alright, so the next thing I'm looking at is to make sure that this vertical piece is completely vertical, and this horizontal piece, they're both butted up against a little gauge they provide here. I want the joint where these two pieces meet to be completely flush, which they are. Also, this vertical piece is supposed to be centered between these two, between these keys. So there should be an equal space here as there is here. And again, that's what was set up prior by adjusting this gauge. I had it set up for 3 1/4, for 4 1/4 for a practice run. It's at 3 1/4. I didn't need to make any adjustments. So this jig is pretty much good to go. So I'm going to get my eye protection on, my hearing protection, and we'll make our cuts. I'm going to start the router this way and run it this way. Normally, again, you'd be working from left to right with a freehand router, but they want you to actually make what's called a climbing cut, where you go from right to left, and that helps prevent tear out of this material. This is nice quality maple, and we don't want to mess it up. So I'm going to go ahead and get my hearing protection on, and we'll make our cuts. So the first thing I'm going to do is actually going to bottom it out, make sure it's locked, and now I'm going to turn it on. Okay, so that went really well. Looks really nice. I'm absolutely covered in sawdust of wood chips from this cut. So what I'm going to do is release the wood from this clamp, pulling this up, and we're going to do a test fit. Okay, good. So this is one of my sideboards. I wrote SI on here, side inside. Let's just put that down now. Release this guy. Okay, and this is my front board. Alright, so make sure this stays in view here. What this will do, this will plug into there. Oh, I'm holding it upside down, but this goes like that. Alright, so it looks good. To get it to come together, I'm going to use a scrap block and a mallet. And I'm just going to give that some persuasion. How does it look? It looks really cool. So if I can get this on camera. Looks really, really nice. Great. So this is a nice secure joint. So I'm going to go ahead and do the other corners. I have 3 more corners to do. And then we will assemble this, do the rest of this drawer work like we did before. So that will include getting a 1/4 inch deep groove, 1/4 inch wide and 1/4 inch deep, the whole length of all our pieces. And then I will, and that'll be for the to accept the bottom portion of this drawer. And then I'll also notch out the portion of the back to use with the balloon drawer slides. So that's it. That's how you use a dovetail jig. There is a troubleshooting section in the manual, and basically if it tells you how to examine these and fit these up. So if these dovetails joints were too shallow or too deep, it tells you really you're just making adjustments either on the jig or the router depth. But I'm really happy with how this looks. It's gonna, once this is sanded and polyurethaned, this will be really nice. Alright, that's it for this section.